Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Sheila Hargis with Travis Audubon, and I will be the moderator for our question and answer period tonight. But I'm going to start by introducing you to the two co-producers of Origins of a Green Identity, and then we'll get to your questions. So if you haven't already, be sure and enter your questions in the chat box and we'll get to as many as possible. So now to introductions. Karen Kocher is an Austin-based media producer who works in film, video, and multimedia. Karen has been teaching digital post-production and occasionally documentary production and documentary history for the Department of Radio, Television, and Film at the University of Texas at Austin since 1998. Over the past decade, she has been producing an ongoing series, Living Springs, about the culture, history, and science of Barton Springs Pool. Living Springs' home base is the interactive theater at the Beverly S. Sheffield Education Center, a science education center at Barton Springs visited by over 90,000 people each year. She has won recognition for this work from the Lone Star chapter of the Sierra Club and South by Southwest Interactive. And Karen is with us tonight to answer questions.
Thanks so much, Sheila.
Yes. Let me introduce Monica and then we'll get started.
Yes.
So, Monica Flores is a freelance media producer specializing in writing and visual storytelling. Having studied journalism and radio, television, film at the graduate level at the University of Texas at Austin, her experience includes documentary, newsroom, and exhibit production, most recently in collaboration with Living Springs Films. Monica is an avid lover of Austin's natural green spaces, and her latest work reflects her desire to inspire the community to prioritize their protection. So thank you, Karen, for being with us tonight, and thank you for Origins of a Green Identity. I just watched it and it was fascinating. I'm very happy to know the history or some of the history of Austin's conservation pioneers. And I just want to say thank goodness for Roberta and uppity women, right?
Yes. Well, I'm sorry that my partner, uppity woman, Monica, can't be here. It's a spring break. And so I'm actually broadcasting from Marfa, Texas. Although you wouldn't know it from my background. It's, the desert's much more inspiring than this. But yeah, thank you so much, Sheila.
Yes. Well, thank you for arranging to be with us tonight. So the first question we have for you is, this person would like to know more about what inspired you to make this film.
Well, this film grew out of the Living Springs documentary series. And so we have done many films about the history of Barton Springs. And so the question that inspired this particular film was, when did people first become worried about the future of Barton Springs? And that was the catalyst for the film. As you could see, it ranged beyond Barton Springs and Barton Creek to the Town Lake Hike and Bike Trail. But certainly that was our impetus, was to explore those early concerns and worries.
Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. Was Barton Springs a segregated park?
Well, yes, it was. And that is, one of the things is that if you go to Barton Springs today, I really do think that it's really one of the most diverse places in Austin. You see people from all over the world and, all colors of people, races of people. But yes, Barton Springs, it's not really a dirty little secret anymore, was a segregated facility. And as part of Living Springs, we have a film called A Reflecting Pool. And in that explores the cultural history of Barton Springs. And I think it's worth checking it out. So yes, absolutely, Barton Springs is segregated, and it was never official. It was, de facto segregation. And it wasn't until the early to mid 60s that really started to change.
Right. So the next question is, hopefully one you can answer to. What work is being done to continue to preserve our parks? What is or are new issues that need to be addressed?
Oh, wow. Okay, that is a very big question. I could talk, I could talk all night about it. I'll just focus on Barton Creek for the moment. So with Barton Creek, the city of Austin has done a good job over time instituting an environmental ethic into the city government. So I think that within the city, you have a lot of rules and regulations. Of course, we have the Save Our Springs ordinance, but what happens outside of the city, and so much of the land that feeds Barton Springs is outside the city's jurisdiction. And so, how can we protect those outlying areas? So the city of Austin, the citizens of Austin have over time voted for one bond issue after the other. And so we have water quality protection lands that is land that is not inside Austin's jurisdiction, but that has been purchased by the citizens of Austin, either through an outright purchase or through a conservation easement. So that, is one of the things that is helping to protect our aquifer. There are a number of environmental groups, the Save Barton Creek Association, the Save Our Springs Alliance, the Barton Springs Conservancy, let's see who else, the new Great Springs Project and the Hill Country Conservancy. And the Hill Country Conservancy and the Great Springs Project are taking a more regional view of things. And the Save Barton Creek Association are working to purchase additional lands and then also work on the governmental front, because direct discharge into hill country streams is one of the biggest threats to water quality. And that's happening, in Dripping Springs and other hill country towns are getting permits from the TCEQ, not to get too technical tonight, but to allow this direct discharge of treated sewage effluent into hill country creeks and streams. And that is probably one of the very large threats. Did I miss something, Sheila? That question.
Great job.
Okay. I mean, beyond Barton Creek, I think, just purchasing more parkland and, historically the inequitable distribution of parkland, because it is no doubt that the majority of efforts early on had focused on West Austin, because that's where most of the conservation folks lived. And so I think, having equitable distribution of parkland is also, something that is an ongoing effort and obviously needs more attention. And the Austin Parks Foundation is doing a great job on that front.
Yeah, and I forget who it was in the film that said Roberta persisted. But I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind, that we need to continue to persist in taking care of our environment.
Yes, and I mean, I have to say that Travis Audubon has been there since day one. I mean, that as the film revealed, Travis Audubon was one of the first groups that really sounded the alarm when it came to Barton Creek and the potential loss of diversity of species. Travis Audubon was there. In 1970, Travis Audubon identified places in Austin, around Austin, and that wasn't just West Austin that needed to be preserved. And in the mid 80s, Stuart Strong, who was an assistant parks director, he picked up that list that the Travis Audubon had come up with in 1970 to figure out what was still left. And some of the urban parks and preserves within the city of Austin came from that original list drawn up by Travis Audubon.
All right, very, very nice to know. All right, yes. The next question. There was a lot of information about Roberta Crenshaw, but what do we know about Beverly Sheffield and why he was so passionate about conservation? And then in parentheses, was he an early Travis Audubon member?
From my research, he was one of the founders of Travis Audubon. And as to why he was so passionate, I think it was a spiritual calling for Beverly Sheffield. He felt that people needed, psychologically and spiritually, that people needed open space. Roberta Crenshaw gets more attention in our film than Beverly. Beverly was a city employee, and as such, he can only stick his neck out so far without, losing his job, alienating him. And his job was to represent everybody and not just the environmental point of view. So when things started to get heated, he kind of, he made the choice. I don't, can't get into his mind, but, he kind of stepped aside from his active involvement, although he was always a big booster. And interestingly, in the 90s, when the Save Springs organization popped up, Beverly came back in, and he was a real cheerleader for the Save Our Springs movement. So it never was far from his heart.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea what Austin is facing today in terms of continuing its conservation efforts in the face of so much unprecedented growth? Although from the film, it looks like Austin has always faced unprecedented growth.
I know, really, it's, it's a pretty popular place because it is so beautiful. Wow. I'd like to think that the environmental ethic has become part of the city's code. And of course, we're always needing to push more for that. The whole code next. I know that the Save Barton Creek Association and Save Our Springs Alliance were very actively involved. And I'm sure that I'm leaving some organizations out. Perhaps Travis Audubon also, in terms of rewriting that code to make sure that the idea of compact and connected was the word that kept coming up, the words for, during Code Next. And there were many people that said, don't forget green. Now, environmentalism is very important in our code. And I know that, the environmental ethic is sadly really not part of our entire development mentality. And so while people are becoming more green, I think we can just, it is an uphill battle all the time, which sounds kind of sad. But I hope that the story that we put together tonight, that you saw tonight, will help to inspire people to, that it's worth fighting for. The fact that we have the Barton Creek Greenbelt is really been an ongoing effort. And Roberta and Beverly really just pushed the ball that far. It was really people that came after that have, continued to push. People like Ted Siff and Beverly Griffith, who really helped, and people in the Parks Department, Butch Smith, to help us get the Barton Creek Wilderness Park. It's just an ongoing effort.
Right. And I'm going to interject one of my own questions because, in the 90s, the Barton, the Balcones Canyonlands Conservation Plan came into being. So that seemed to have been a later way of preserving a lot of land for us. So.
Yeah, and that's really fascinating, and something that I hope to explore in later films is just this: can we regulate it, or do we just need to buy it? Because of the Texas ethic about private property rights, I think that the buy it has had a lot of success. Although we obviously can't buy everything, and just because we can't buy it, should that mean that we don't preserve it? But the Balcones Canyonlands, that was, Mayor Bruce Todd pushed that through. And then on the other side, we had Beverly Griffin and Louise Epstein pushing through the other one. And, the lore behind that is a story for another day, but it is fascinating. And I've done a lot of research into it. So I hope to present that story one day.
Okay, I'm going to hold you to that.
Okay, well, I'm going to hold everybody who's listening tonight when we raise funds to help us out, because it really was a community effort to raise the funds for the film. So it's not easy to get funding for films that focus on local issues because, obviously the audience is smaller. So, yeah.
All right, good point there. All right, next question. What do you feel is the state of political tension in Austin now between conservationists and those who favor development?
Wow, that is, I wish whoever that is could be more specific in their question. Obviously there's more rules and regulations around development. I think, the biggest thing is, can we enforce the rules that we have on the books? Like, for example, the heritage tree ordinance that we have is, there's always a push and pull, and the people that are developing are, they have a financial goal in like getting that tree to go away because it's in their way. And So to what extent does the city have the people to enforce the rules that are on the books? I mean, that's been my own observation, is that there aren't enough people to enforce the rules that we have. And there's just so much development going on. And the developers are complaining that the process is too slow and it's onerous. So, you know, if I was mayor and I had endless money, I would hire more people to enforce the rules that we already have on the books and make sure that those rules stay on the books, because that is something that in the code next, which now they're changing to like the land development code, which under another name is code next, which was the proposed changes to make our development system more efficient. But we need to make sure that we maintain the parkland dedication part of the parkland dedication ordinance, the heritage tree ordinance, that new developments that are coming up develop under the Save Our Springs ordinance in the recharge zone and contributing zone to Barton Springs. So we just need to maintain the rules that we have and be involved as citizens to keep your eye out in your own neighborhood.
Okay. Do you have any more information about the history of Austin conservation on the east side?
Well, I have a lot of information in my head about that. You know, obviously, Susanna Almanza and Poder has been amazingly active and important in conserving the east side, and really the 1928 plan, which we're hearing, at least I think we're hearing more and more about the master plan of 1928 and how that segregated the city of Austin. I mean, we referenced the 1928 plan, and it was a real challenge for us that we didn't want to derail our Roberta story. But, you know, that's a film in itself, the 1928 plan, that basically not only segregated the city, but also pushed industrial uses and commercial uses over to East Austin, which has impacted the Black and Latino communities. And, you know, Susanna Almanza and Poder, I would say, has been the biggest advocate for the East Side. Interestingly, Roberta Crenshaw donated, and this isn't in our documentary, but there's a lot of things that she did that aren't in our documentary because we just had to, you know, cut some things out. But she donated over 30 acres of her own land that's become the Roy Guerrero Colorado River Park. So yeah, she didn't just work in West Austin. She really felt like parks should be for all people. So beyond Susanna Almanza, I think that the Austin Parks Foundation has really focused on enhancing and improving park facilities in what they call the Eastern Crescent. So, you know, we can always do more, and Austin needs more parkland. I like to think of Austin as a park city, but, you know, it certainly doesn't rate at the top across the nation. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with private property. But we need to maintain that when development comes, that they need to provide for parkland within their plans.
Yes, yes. And I love Roy Guerrero, so as a birding place, so I now love it even more knowing the history of it. All right, so the next question is, will this film be available for viewing again?
Yes, it will. So it's going to be, it's available through a link that I'm trying to think how I can do. We have a Facebook page. It's called Living Springs Austin Interactive Documentary, because our project is truly interactive in the exhibit at Beverly Sheffield Center. So on our Facebook page, I can post a link to a streaming. I can easily put it in the chat. I'm not sure how that will be shared. I think that I shared, whoops, hang on for 1 second. I just clicked something on my computer. So I think I shared that link with you, Sheila. So we can, you know, we're happy to share the link. It is available on demand for streaming, and it is going to broadcast again on KLRU on Earth Day. So that's pretty cool. I would say like our Facebook page, and anyone can shoot me an email if you have any additional questions or you want links or resources. Part of my goal with the Living Springs project as a whole is to build community around our natural resources. So I'm always happy to share.
Great. And Laura said she would put that link in the chat, so she's taking care of that for us.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So it's streaming on PBS for the next, I think, 2 years or year and a half.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then how do we donate to support your next film? This was a wonderful piece.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So livingsprings.austin.org. Livingsprings.austin.org is our website, and you can find all of our films there, including a link to this one, livingsprings.austin.org. And there is a donate button. The Save Barton Creek Association is a fiscal sponsor for Living Springs. So any money that you send to Save Barton Creek Association, if you prefer to write a check, you can do that and make it and just put Living Springs in the memo line. So any funds that we have will go toward our next work, which actually, so it's the COVID time right now, as we all are readily aware, but hopefully we're all getting our vaccines. And Monica and I have an exhibit that's mounted right now at the Beverly Sheffield Center. It's called Barton Creek Time Stream. And that is an ongoing, that is an exhibit that will open to the public soon. And that is celebrating 50 plus years of stewardship on Barton Creek. And that exhibit is free and open to the public. And as soon as the Parks and Recreation Department opens that facility, then it's an additional resource for the community. Over 80 different stewards of Barton Creek submitted their personal stories. So as well as we have a timeline of key events in Barton Creek protection efforts. So that exhibit will actually be at the Beverly S. Sheffield Education Center at Barton Springs. And we're currently raising funds to build that out as a website. So
wonderful.
The work goes on.
Right, right. And I think we were talking before we went live, and you were telling me it took about 24 months to produce this film, including money raising and other efforts.
Yes. So, I mean, why does it take so long to make a historic film? Well, you know, there's just a lot of research that goes into finding out, you know, what happened. You know, we first have to lay out what happened. And what happened is discovered through newspapers, through books, through interviewing people, through digging through the archives at the Austin History Center. So it's first figuring out just like, how do we get from point A to point B? And from there, who are the main players? And from there, we need to now raise some money so we can go out and interview people. And from there, we put together what we have and look at it. And then we have to find archival materials, because it's not interesting to listen to a bunch of talking heads for the entire film. So how do we make it visual? We have to go out and shoot the archival materials. And then there's the writing. So Monica and I really collaborated quite a bit on, you know, how do we get from point A to point B with the narration and make a very complex topic accessible to people. I mean, I think to some extent, the film that we have will be of interest to people that, you know, are the choir. You know, I think it's a pretty complex story. And then, you know, there's the editing, and then COVID shut down the archives and we couldn't get the archive out. So anyway, before you know it, 24 months is like gone like that.
Well, that's a fascinating process. And now I totally understand why it took 24 months.
Yes, it's, and it's a labor of love. I mean, I just love digging in the archives. The Travis Audubon archives at the Austin History Center are amazing. They're scrapbooks. And I mean, I could just do a whole film on Travis Audubon. Okay. Any number of these, and there'll be a lot of great footage of birds, I'm sure.
Excellent.
I love that photo that we have of one of the earliest photos of all the people looking up in their binoculars. I'm sure they were looking at a bird. We took, you know, narrative liberty, and, you know, that they were concerned about what they saw. You know, when people are birding and they're looking through their binoculars, there is a certain seriousness to the expression. So we made full use of that.
Yes, I was going to tell you that was probably my favorite photograph in the whole film.
It's a good one. I have a little printout of that, and it's I made it into a fridge magnet.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
So I I did take the liberty of keeping a checklist of the birds I heard and saw in the film. So
Oh,
I have turkey vulture, painted bunting, and golden cheek warbler. Did I miss any?
yes, I really didn't want to have any bird sounds in there that weren't actual from this area because I knew that what there would be birders or people looking and saying, why do you have a, I don't know, Alaskan something or other in there? And yeah, I did search out those bird sounds on, intentionally. So I'm glad that someone was paying attention.
Oh, yes, yes. Okay, very good.
And I mean, I'm a beginning baby birder in the sense of I'm becoming more interested in birds, but I really aim for accuracy in the archive that we use and in, the sound effects that we use, that they're not from somewhere else.
That drives the birders crazy when we hear that in films.
I'm sure. And there is actually this one sound effect that I hear in so many television shows, and I don't even know what bird it is, but it must be like in the list of sound effects of birds, like on the top alphabetically, because I was like, there goes that bird again. If I hear that bird again. And one day I'm going to identify what it is.
Well, frequently red-tailed hawk vocalizations are kind of played over bald eagles. Bald eagles have a very wimpy vocalization and doesn't seem very majestic for a bald eagle, so they dub in red-tailed hawks frequently. So maybe that's what you're hearing. I'm not sure.
I mean, in terms of you said the turkey vulture that you heard. I mean, I
Oh, I
think
saw
that,
the turkey vulture.
oh, you saw. Okay. I mean, because one of the sounds, and I'm pretty sure that it was a hawk that we used, that for me had a very wistful sound. And so, and it's maybe be harder to hear in your computer, but I found that a very wistful sound, and I often use that in my editing as punctuation at the end of a sequence to kind of like go out of a sequence. So anyway, as the editor of the film, as well as all the other things, for me, they certain sounds had emotional feelings, and I used that.
All right, very good. Well, I missed that one, so I'll have to go back and watch the film again and
Okay.
listen for that one specifically.
Okay.
All right, well, that is our last question. So is anything else that you'd like to share with us, Karen?
No, I just really appreciate the reception that the film is getting. It was, at times wondering, like, when is this film going to be finished? Birthing a baby would be the metaphor. I encourage people, if you have any questions or comments that we didn't address tonight, to reach out to me. I teach at UT in the radio, television, film department, so you can find me on the website there and just shoot me an email. And anyone has interesting ideas for offshoot films, I'd love to hear it. And I would just appreciate KLRU, awesome PBS, who's behind the scenes. You probably don't see them tonight. And Sheila, thank you for taking time out of your night. And to our funders, which are identified at the end of the documentary.
Yes, well, thank you again, Karen. It was wonderful getting to meet you and talk with you tonight. And I look forward to seeing you out on a Travis Audubon field trip. I'll be happy to help you develop your beginning birding skills.
Oh, thank you. I've been wanting to come to the Blair Woods for a while. And I've sent other people there that visit Austin. So actually, Frank Blair, I'm very interested in him. I don't know if you saw him. He was, it was a rather poor quality photograph, but in the Austin Environmental Council, he was one of the people over there on the right-hand side. And he's someone who I feel like bears some stories.
Yes, there are lots of stories you need to help us tell.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Have a good evening and we'll see you soon.